Welcome to Founders Unplugged, hosted by Greg McCallum. Long-form, honest conversations with founders and entrepreneurs from around the world. This is part 2 of this episode. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already. Link in the description.
Hello, Greg here from the future. Just before this episode starts, I should warn you, this was recorded not in my usual location. And because of that, unfortunately, the audio is a little bit all over the place on my behalf. My guest audio is fine. So apologies for that in advance. But it is worth saying a huge thank you to Seed Legals and Anthony, the CEO there at Seed Legals, for allowing me to use one of their offices in their new office space in London as I was out on a trip and I was in a bit of a bind and I really wanted to continue to speak to my guest today, Mike. So huge thank you to Seed Legals for doing that. I'm going to put their information in the description below just as a way of saying thank you. So do check them out if you're raising money or you need help with SCIS and all that kind of stuff. They're a great resource for that and a load of other things too. So thank you to Seed Legals. Thank you to Anthony and the whole team for looking after me that particular day while I was out and about and needed a place to record this podcast. But unfortunately, it does mean I didn't have my usual equipment with me, so the audio is a little bit rough. So apologies for that, but it's still a great episode. Mike is still a fantastic guy. You really should be listening to this episode. So thank you very much for tuning in and see you in the next one. Cheers.
Okay, and we're back to part 2. I'm here with Mike. If you haven't watched part 1, go and check it out. It came out a couple of days ago. Lays much of the foundation for what we're talking about, who Mike is, where he's been, his background, etc., leading up to kind of more in the moment stuff. We were just getting to it, weren't we? So we were building up to it. Are we ready to talk about Underdog X? You just refer to it as Underdog, by the way, or is it you always put the X at the end?
Yeah, Underdog X. I mean, there's a reason for it, mostly because the .com is available. But
right, okay.
Although we registered with .co, it's available as a premium domain. So if we ever lots of money, I'll buy the .com. Underdog.com is not available. So for that reason, it became Underdog X.
Fair enough. So tell me about Underdog X.
Yeah, we can call it Underdog. We're amongst
UDX.
With the X, maybe without the X. So it came about because after my last VC-backed company, I left, is a better way of putting it, relatively quickly. And what I realized is I loved that kind of foundational element of the journey. I wasn't, as we talked about in the previous episode, really that keen to put all my eggs in one basket and just continue working on one thing for the next 10, 15 years. And that became clear to me pretty early on. So I almost fell on my own sword and said, look, I think I've done a good job at setting up the foundations of the company. We built the team, again, maybe a bit too quickly, but we've built up the team. You're heading in the right direction. I kind of feel that my job here is done, which may seem weird, right? Because the company was going great guns at the time and we were raising tons of capital and it's still going to this day, right? So kudos to them. I just didn't feel like I was prepared to commit to one thing forever, which maybe is a personality trait, right? But for whatever reason, I chose to leave. And whilst I was figuring out what I wanted to do next, an opportunity landed on my lap to mentor day zero founders, i.e. individuals who wanted to start a business but hadn't yet started. And that was through another company, and they were paying me not a lot, but something to mentor these individuals. And over the course of 12 months, I worked with 112 founders. And that for me was just eye-opening because it fed into what I enjoy doing, which is work, juggling many plates and working on many things at once. But I also started I realized 2 things. Number one, I was pretty bad at picking who was going to outperform as a founder off the back of essentially a CV and application form. The people who on paper looked amazing didn't necessarily outperform. And the people who I might have otherwise written off, not always, of course, but sometimes did actually outperform. And I was like, well, this feeds in to angel investing or early stage venture. Because what looks great may not actually pan out how you expect, and what looks rubbish might actually outperform, which is, of course, why there are so many VCs that have got this anti-portfolio, i.e. people they passed on who went on to do exceptionally well. So that was one thing that struck me. And I was like, maybe the way that I've been investing hasn't been the smartest or the most effective. The second thing I realized was that a lot of these founders, despite being from really different backgrounds and working on exceptionally disparate businesses, so, completely different business models, sectors, products and services, run by people who were very different from one another, whilst they were all different, I started to see commonalities, i.e. at similar stages, at similar points in time, different people would face the same hurdles, the same problems. So what I was able to do over the course of that year was almost systemize a plan for them. And it's not a silver bullet, right? It's not saying, if you follow these 10 steps, you will build a world-changing business. I'd like, again, if anyone has got that playbook, please let me know, because I will also give you all of my money. There are no silver bullets, and anyone trying to sell you one is, in my view, a charlatan. But there were enough commonalities. I was like, okay, yeah, whilst they are all, the analogy I use is, whilst they are all individual snowflakes and they've got their own characteristics and they are unique, genuinely every founder is unique, actually, collectively, they're all a big ball of snow. And that ball of snow can be shaped into a beautiful snowman or ice sculpture or whatever you want it to be. So I started to develop that playbook. And again, as I say to all of our founders at Underdog X, I say, look, there are 1,000,001 ways to build a business. And I am not saying that I am right. I'm just saying that this is my way. This is the way that I have found, over the course of 15 years in venture and, a year of intensely working one-to-one and one-to-many with founders, and the past year and a half, 2 years working at Underdog. This is what I think will not reduce any risk of failure or 100% guarantee you success, but will optimize your chances of succeeding, notwithstanding, of course, all the external factors that may come in and scupper your chances of success. And ultimately, look, you're a founder yourself, right? And you've worked with startups before. I don't need to preach to the choir, but building a startup is hard enough as it is. Why the heck do you want to make your life harder for yourself? Find the path of least resistance, which again is an inherently lazy individual, is just what comes naturally to me. I'm looking for efficiencies. So find that path of least resistance, and then just try and reduce the risk of failure by getting rid of some of the stuff that doesn't make sense at this point in time and optimizing for the stuff that does make sense. I don't know if that makes sense. Hopefully it kind of correlates.
No, it absolutely does. Yeah, and sorry, I had to mute halfway in case you heard a Hoover go off in the office midway through talking. No, it absolutely does. And so much of what you said there resonates because, there is no silver bullet. That one resonates a lot. As you know, I'm known. Well, I think as you know, I'm known as the no bullshit advisor, and a large part of that is because, I'm very tired of this idea of off the shelf advice. And in some ways, this podcast is kind of the whole point of this show is to kind of be the anti-startup podcast, because so many of them, you have guests that are kind of like, this is what you need to do. These are the top 10 tips. And there's a reason why I don't have clips on TikTok of my guests talking about top 10 ways to be successful, because it doesn't exist. And instead, I think what is useful is just hearing people talk about their experiences, talking about how they got, like we did in part one, talking about your career journey, talking about your path, because everyone's interesting. The way everyone did it is slightly different, but you might relate to certain elements of that story, either because you've got a similar journey, you're going on a similar journey, you've been on a similar journey, and you might just take certain things from it here and there that work for you or not. And that's really the only way to do it, in my view, because and yes, there are circumstances and there are times like, or individuals like yourself where they take that cumulative knowledge and put it together and go, look, this is, like you said, this is what works for me, or what has sometimes worked for me, not always, whatever. It might be helpful for you, just give it a shot. That's exactly what I do to an extent, but just not in a well-organized way like you do. And that's all we can do. That's all we can do. There's, bar there being some sort of fortune teller aspect of it, it can't exist. So we just have to learn from each other. It's why one of the main pieces of advice that I give, and I know a lot of others give too, for anyone looking to start a business for the first time, any business, by the way, not just in venture or literally anything. You want to become a bricklayer, you want to open a corner shop, a restaurant, whatever. The number one thing you've got to do is start hanging out with other business owners, start hanging out with other entrepreneurs, other founders. because that's where you're going to learn. You're going to learn from sitting in the pub or the cafe or the restaurant, talking, sharing war stories. May not be directly the same situation as you, but you'll get something out of it. I think that's all we can really do to support each other, really, until something better comes along, I guess.
And I think
Until maybe I create my top 10 book, and then obviously that would be different.
I'd be a buyer of the book. So as long as I get the time copy, that's all I ask for. Yeah.
I mean, it would just be the same tip all the way through. It would just be sell, repeated 10 times. That's basically
it. Times.
Yeah.
No, I love it. Look, I basically agree with all of that, and I love the no BS advisor tagline, because we're also a no BS program, I suppose, or whatever you want to call us. We do tell the harsh truths that others, especially VCs, even angels to an extent, aren't really able to.
Yeah.
And there's a common joke that you will never get a no from a VC, because they don't want to write you off, right? You might succeed. And then I was always in support of them. They just weren't quite right for me at that time. So
they were just too early. They were too early.
Yeah, too early, or it was out of thesis, or whatever excuse it was.
Yeah.
And VCs, investors do get lambasted. I mean, there's a famous one, a famous email, which I think has been redacted, so I don't even know who wrote it, but to the founders of Airbnb, saying something along the lines of, yeah, thank you so much for coming in and speaking to us about your startup, Air Bed and Breakfast, as it was known then. We've considered it internally. Unfortunately, we don't think that the market will be big enough, so we will have to pass. And of course, now, with the benefit of hindsight, you can look back and say, well, they were creating that market or recreating the market or taking a chunk out of the hotel market. Now we can say that, right? But I think that was probably not atypical of investors at the time, which is why they did struggle to raise. And investors aren't, some of them, I guess, have become sages and, I'm showing my age here, but mystic megs with their crystal ball, being able to predict the future. And they have made their careers and their fortunes off the back of that. But I think it is hard to find people who have consistently been right and universally been right, as we talked about before. There are too many external factors, even if you do get everything right. So I don't think that is possible as an investor. But equally, what I have always wanted to do is work with people who are building awesome things, like cool people building awesome things that may have a positive impact on the world, whatever that might look like. That's part of what makes me tick. I enjoy it. And to me, it doesn't feel like work. We can sit here for an hour talking about it and I will leave buzzing, right? It's just what excites me. And if I can find a way of monetizing that, even better, right? So I can work, but without really needing to work. It's like a hobby for me. If I can do enjoyable stuff and make money, but also have a positive impact or increase the chances of either someone who otherwise wouldn't start a business starting one, or someone who's already started actually succeeding, whatever that measure of success looks like for them, even better, right? That's my own little positive contribution to the world. And that ultimately is what was the genesis of the Underdog X idea, was that there are tons of people who might make exceptionally great founders or entrepreneurs, but never start for all manner of reasons. They might not even identify as a founder. That's part of the reason we used to be Underdog Accelerator. But I realized, and actually it was proven to me when I was on an entrepreneurship panel at one of the London business schools. And there were probably 200 people in the room, all of whom were either MBAs or bachelors in business. And at the beginning of my intro, I said, I run a startup accelerator. Please put your hand up if you know what a startup accelerator is. And no joke, 2 people, I'm discounting the faculty, 2 people, of the students, and there were 200 of them, put their hands up. And I was like, well, let me tell you what it is. And I explained what it is that we do. And afterwards, I was swarmed by people who were excited to speak with me and ask me questions about the opportunity to build a business. But if I'd have just said, yeah, I run a startup accelerator, 99% would not have known what that is. So I think we've got to be intentional with our language to a certain extent. But there, for me at least, it seems, there is no way or no other way other than what we do for people to, as part of a group, as part of a cohort, dip their toe into the waters when it comes to starting a business. Because even if you look at the people first accelerators like Antler or Entrepreneur First, which came before them, even if you look at them and you say, well, they are investing and working with people at the earliest stage in their startup journeys, i.e. individuals who want to start a business, but maybe don't even have an idea, certainly don't have a team, no product, no nothing. They're just individuals. Even if you look at them, actually those individuals are forced to quit their jobs, maybe relocate to a city, commit 3 months for no pay or very little pay to be part of this program. And for a lot of people, that is completely out of reach.
Yeah.
As we talked about in part one, they might have families that they've got to provide for themselves. They might not have the FU money that I was lucky enough to have accumulated over my short career. They might not have that. They might not be able to relocate because they've got family ties. They might still be in full-time education, or as some of our founders have found themselves, joining us before they go off to uni. So our youngest participant today has been 18 years old. He just finished sixth form college, high school for the Americans listening. So he had to go to university. He couldn't just say, "Oh, let me take the next 5 years." I mean, he could have done. He could have been not even a dropout. He could have been did not even attend, right? And maybe there's something to be said for that. But from my perspective, as we talked about earlier, I think building a business is hard enough as it is. And the chances of building something that is going to get you an outsized return is so slim, if you look at the numbers, that it would be wrong of me to tell people to jump, same as I did after banking, right? To jump in feet first into the world of venture. That's not sensible. So we've got to give ourselves, and this is what I built my life on, give ourselves optionality, the ability to juggle many plates. That's my belief anyway. And I would never say to someone, "Oh, that sounds like a really great startup idea. Why don't you quit your job, relocate to a new city and put all your eggs in one basket and start building it?" I don't think that is a smart way of doing it. I don't know if you disagree.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of to this point about something that actually I was talking about with one of my portcos yesterday. So I met them among all the other things I was doing in London the last couple of days. It was to meet them, those two, and they made a really interesting. They're originally from France, and so they've talked a lot to me about their experiences in different startup places around Europe and around the world. And they confided in me. I'm not going to say who they are, but they confided in me that they found that London has, while one of the biggest and one of the most diverse and all that, also probably because of the size, one of the most predatory. In that there are a lot of people looking to try and get a piece of the pie, especially from early stage founders. Whether it's to try and convince them to come onto this thing, to do this thing, or to buy this course, or to buy this list, or whatever. Everyone wants a piece of the action. It's a whole industry that is, if you go in it at the wrong angle and too naive, it can chew you up and spit you out before you've even sort of got your first foot forward. So to your point about the reason why I sort of say that is because to your point about the approach, like it's important because there are so many others out there that would just take that opportunity to be like, yeah, come and join our accelerator, like drop everything, because they don't generally give a shit. They're looking out for themselves. We need bums on seats. We need to to hit our numbers, or whatever it is, or we need to be able to justify that to our limited partners if there's a fund, whatever it might be. That's all they're interested in. And so but it's a valid point. I'm not sure if I 100% agree with them on that about London being the most predatory. I have a feeling it's probably just, again, size and all that. Again, that whole thing about data, right? Causation and all that. But
Hi, a friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like and subscribe. And if you are feeling really supportive, please consider reviewing the show on the podcast platform of your choice. It all really helps support what we do. Thank you. Now back to the show.
But it is a problem. I mean, that is the bullshit that I'm kind of against. So yeah, it's great that you guys are taking that approach, because I think it's very, very important. And to be honest with people, when it comes to honesty and integrity are really important things in this space. I mean, especially if we're trying, we're trying to encourage the next generation of business owners to lead with that as at the forefront as well, right? We want to have this sort of more, I don't know, this more conscious capitalist world. I guess we all want that. So we need to ingratiate people into starting their business, by starting them on the right foot. So how does that translate then, sort of more practically? Like if someone did want to join your accelerator, well, I mean, first of all, is it entirely in person, and how long is it for? Like, what's the sort of format of what you guys do?
Yeah, so we are abnormal, and like frankly, I don't think that there is anyone doing things the way that we are doing them. So maybe we're our own unique little snowflake, but in a bigger cloud of snow, perhaps. And it is, I can't say that what we are doing will outperform. I don't have the data yet. Time will tell. But my thesis, or our thesis, is that there are people who would make exceptional founders, but for whom either very real or artificial barriers exist to enable them to actually take that leap and start something. So whether that barrier be actually, I don't have access to capital, to the know-how or knowledge, I'm lacking perceived experience perhaps, I have I don't know, whatever else it might be. There might be like inherent things that are stopping them from doing that. So is there a way that we can actually provide them with solutions to those problems? So with a bit of seed capital, they might not have friends and family that can invest in them, or their own pot of money that they have earned that they can put to, put at risk to start a new business. So can we provide not millions, but a small but meaningful check that enables them to take that first step at the right and appropriate point? That might be one thing. Can we provide them with a network, especially if they are solo founders? And you talked, I think, in part one about co-founder conflict being one of the greatest causes of any startup's failure. And that is true. That has been borne out by the data. So our bias, if we have one, we work obviously with, well, not obviously, but we do work with co-founders and with teams. But my general thought is that actually the best founders tend to be solo founders. And that's not to say they build the business alone. They will build a founding team around them, but that will be a founding team, not the founder. That's my thesis. And I say that, by the way, as an equal co-founder in Underdog. So I understand the irony. Do as I say, not as I do. But, for many people, they won't have access to, I was lucky. I was able to pick Steve, my co-founder, from a pool of hundreds of people that I work with. So that was a deliberate choice. And we had worked together for 18 months, maybe 2 years. So we knew how we worked and how we could complement each other. For many people, that's not possible. So you might have to start the journey alone. You might have to start the money with no journey, alone, part-time, from your own home, right? Not being able to relocate to Silicon Valley or to London as, the greatest source of capital for startups in the UK. So we've tried to lower those barriers as well, and to say, let us try and provide you with a sense of community, with mentors who've been there and done it, with a process that we think broadly works, although your mileage might vary, right? So do your own thing. But, we can probably predict through all those data points that we talked about before, where you might fall down or where you might struggle. And this is a way that you can overcome those hurdles. So we're doing that, but also we're saying, actually, you don't need to quit your job, relocate, work for free, and work full time. Actually, you do it part time at your own pace to a large degree. We're not here to baby, to spoon feed you like a baby, but we'll provide you with the structure and the support that you need. You can progress at broadly your own pace as long as you are making progress, you can de-risk it for yourself. So that is the biggest thing for me. I want to be able to give people the opportunity, bearing in mind, by the way, I don't know if you agree with this, but I think the vast majority of people are not built and wired to be founders. I don't know what you think about that.
I don't think anyone is, really, to be honest. I mean, if you think about the attributes you need to actually be an on-paper successful founder slash CEO, and I mentioned that for a very good reason, or any of a C-suite, right? But especially the CEO role. Like it's an impossible endeavor. I mean, it's just like, saying what is the perfect profile for a prime minister or a president. It's like, well, obviously that doesn't exist. Like there's no one person that can have the solution for all of society's problems, and then have the will and the energy and the intellect to execute them and deliver on them. Like it's just not possible. And like this is a micro a micro version of that, right? It's even early on, it's complex, but early on, it's manageable somewhat. But as soon as a company becomes a thing unto itself, it's not possible. It's really about you're a chaos wrangler. That's all it is.
I love that.
You know what I mean? From the outside, it looks like you've got it all under control, but in reality, there are many fires that just aren't getting put out or tended to. Like that's the honest truth. So yeah, I just don't think it's actually something that exists. I think it's kind of a myth. You have people that are better at it than others, but quite often I found those that appear to be better at it are just ones that are better at portraying the fact that they are good at being chaos wranglers, like that they're good at putting on that calm exterior. But the reason why I mentioned the CEO thing too is because that is even harder, actually, that transition from founder to CEO. I mean, almost no one, like if you were to talk about the small percentage of people in the population that are, first of all, insane enough to want to be a founder or an entrepreneur, there's that. And then we go even further, those that have the stuff to make it work. But then we go one step further down in this startup inception, and that furthest level down is the small, even far smaller percentage have the skill set, the fortitude, the resilience, the mindset, everything to transition from founder to CEO once a company gets to a certain scale, and there is a certain financial backing or weight to it, various stakeholders, like very few. And that, like the amount that get ousted, quit, like get fired, whatever it is, like it's really hard. Not that I've done it yet, but I've been part of it. I've seen it time and time again. So, I mean, that's a very long answer to your question, but that's my observations at least. I just don't think it exists.
No, I love it. Yeah, and it resonates. And this is the important thing as well. And kind of going back to data points and stuff and trying to predict success. Actually, I think there are commonalities, and we probably can, kind of correlate certain factors that will lead to success. But as I mentioned before, every single founder is unique. They are an individual snowflake. I know that's like a loaded term, but you know what I mean. Like the traditional term is being unique, and it is not to say. So I guess my point is, I wouldn't write someone off because they don't tick all the boxes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we've got to be cognizant that the vast majority of people are simply not well suited to being a founder because of all the complexities we've mentioned. So whilst they can come from, whilst almost anyone could be a founder, most people shouldn't be a founder for all manner of reasons.
Yeah. And you can be, and people can be entrepreneurial, but shouldn't be founders or couldn't be founders, right? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think also you have to define, and this, I mean, not in the sort of like I don't know, Instagrammy way, but like you have to define what we mean by success first of all. Anyway, if we're gonna try and figure out, okay, well, what is the attributes of someone, or that makes a successful founder? So, well, first you need to define that, because that varies wildly. I mean, I would say it's just as much of an impossible thing to try and quantify and fully lock down as asking the question, what makes a successful parent, right? It's like, we definitely know there are things you absolutely shouldn't. We're all in agreement of that. Like, but but there's not really any clear consensus on like, okay, this is absolutely how everyone should raise a child. Like, and and again, what is success in that metric? I mean, is it success that the child just survives past a certain age? Is that, if we're going to be breaking it down to like pure biology and based in history terms, like, in the 20th century, kids didn't live past this age, so now the new standard is this. It's like, okay, is that how we're going to do it? The fact that they got a roof over their heads, the food and food on their plates, is that how we're going to measure it? Is it going to be weight? Is it going to be mental fortitude? Is it going to be money in the bank? Like, what is it? Like, and it's the same thing. You can't, there are too many variables to just sit there and be like, okay, well, this is what success is, and this is the definition of how to get there. It's like, the makeup of what it is that needs to be there. And I love the parent analogy in startups too. It keeps coming up in conversations, but it's such an apt metaphor for creating and running a business, I think. Having a kid.
And I was going to say, one mark of being a good parent is not dropping your child on its head, but actually,
oh, really? Oh shit.
Well, up is one of my friends did tell me that he dropped his kid on his head by accident, and they did survive, and they years on, they seem to be fine. So mistakes happen, right? And stuff happens. Let's say.
And this is the thing. I mean, like, every parent makes mistakes. You lose your temper. You say things you shouldn't have. You whatever. We all do it, and then we beat ourselves about. But that doesn't mean you're a bad parent. In the same way that fucking up as an entrepreneur or a business owner or a founder doesn't mean that you don't have what it takes to do it. But I do have to probably agree that in the same way that there is an enormous amount of people that shouldn't be founders, there are an enormous amount of people that shouldn't be parents. But I think there are far less people that should be founders than our parents.
And by the way, there's no shame in that. There is no shame in being an employee. That is, in fact, that can be a remarkably great thing for the vast majority of people. And I think there is maybe in recent years there's been like a spotlight put on super entrepreneurs and these $1 trillion or hundreds of billions of dollar net worths that have been created by individuals, and these people who are fundamentally changing the world and the way we interact with it, and in some cases maybe changing the course of humanity, right? Out. And without naming names, there are plenty of people in the press at the moment who probably tick not plenty, but there are a number of people in the press at the moment who tick those boxes. But these are the outliers, and that's not to say that you shouldn't try, but also going back to what you were saying, like, what does success mean to you as an individual? That will vary fundamentally from person to person, prospective founder to prospective founder, and actually success for one person might be failure for another, and vice versa.
Well, yeah, and so that's the kind of definition of it that I was saying is like, perhaps the Instagram-y kind of, definition of like one person's success is another man's whatever. But like, I mean, from the point of view of like what makes a successful founder, i.e. what translates into a successful startup, like that again is an entirely subjective and incredibly complex question to answer. I would say even more so than just what success to you as an individual, because everyone has a different evaluation of that as well. But I don't know. I think there's something about entrepreneurship as well, which is like, to be completely brutally blunt and honest, I think one of the reasons why most people wouldn't be capable of being founders, and this isn't to say, oh, because I have this in spades, therefore, why I'm so great and why I can be a founder, is you need a very deep and honest and brutal level of self-awareness and continuous self-reflection without crossing a line of being overly self-critical. And that's a really hard line to find. People either go one way or the other. And let's be honest, you can survive a lot better in society not doing that. You can have a lot better life just cracking on and not having to spend that much time thinking about yourself in that overly analytical way. But that's why that automatically disqualifies like 99.9% of the population. Like, in my view, just like that. And again, that's not to say because I'm so great at it, but it's just a fact. From a personality perspective, that's integral, I would say.
And also, no matter the reason or the attribute that any one of us might believe makes a great founder, and no matter our personal definitions of success or external definitions of success, because I, as an example, might take some venture capital, build a business, sell it for $10 million and think absolutely fantastic. And, I could retain the vast majority of that if it was a one and done round. But the VC would be probably deeply unhappy, right? That would not be a return for. So I guess my point is that we need to think very carefully about whether or not we as individuals want to start a business. But the only way of truly knowing is to actually friggin' do it.
Yeah.
That's the reality, Greg, right? And I suppose my motivation in doing what we do, and we do it for free and we don't make money yet, although I'll tell you our secret plan, or not so secret plan, to make money in the future, bearing in mind those asymmetric upsides in the future. But, day to day, we don't make money and we do everything for free. But part of my motivation for doing what we do is that I would like to give people the opportunity to try it. Even if it's only for like a couple of weeks or a couple of months, or maybe even a couple of years if they can stretch it out. But, very quickly, what we find is that people who apply to join us, and I say apply, you've just got to sign up actually, because we've removed any barrier to entry. You've just got to have a working internet connection and not much else. So you just sign up, but consistently, 60% of people who sign up do not show up. That's been the case.
Right.
And granted, we've only run 3 cohorts, but I suspect this will continue. 60% don't even show up. So that tells you something immediately. But then actually, initially, a lot of what we do is internal in the first few weeks. So it's like reflecting on yourself and what success looks like for you and your motivations for starting a business and understanding your skill sets and your superpowers, what you have the ability to be world class at. All of that happens in the first few weeks. But then there comes a point where we take the spotlight and turn it away from ourselves and the founders and turn it out into the world. And they've got to actually get up off their backsides and start as a proxy for selling, actually going out and talking to prospective customers or people in their problem space and doing customer discovery. And it is at that point that we see the next largest drop off, because people have actually got to go out there and take action. It's not navel gazing and just self-reflection, although I agree with you that is deeply important, but it's actually going out there and doing something and, frankly, risking rejection. That's the biggest thing.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Which is why, in some ways it relates to that point I made earlier, because ego is very much tied with that. So you can't have ego in the way, because if it is, you can't handle rejection. So, and rejection is the name of the game. Like in sales, 101, I know I always refer back to sales, but that's my background. At the end of the day, it's kind of my foundation. Like you can't build your company unless you're prepared to be told no a lot of times. You're looking for that yes. But then you also need to set the I guess the sense, the some essence of self-awareness to know if being told no again and again means maybe you shouldn't be doing it. So it's a really fine line of like being entirely like stubborn to the point of like I'm gonna keep going until I get a yes, while also maintaining that actually maybe this is a shit idea and maybe I need to pivot, maybe I shouldn't do it at all, or whatever. So this is why there's no silver bullet, right? There's a lot of nuance there. But I love that you do that, because I think that's so important, because if it needs to be, because some people discover just as much as you have that drop off, which isn't surprising, and people discover I'm not cut out for this. I imagine there's a lot of people that discover, my God, I never realized this, but I love this. Like I'm really good at this. There are people that are just natural. They may have never sold anything in their life. They may have never thought of running a team before, having to, organize people or events or whatever it is, maybe never had to do any of this sort of stuff. And then suddenly they go, wow. And they're a natural. And I love seeing that.
Yeah. I had a long brainstorm with a marketing genius, a friend of mine called Nikki Dibben this morning. Like literally, she donated 4 hours of her time to me to kind of drill down into what we do and who we do it for. And she helped clarify something for me, which is that we work with three types of people, or the people that we work with tend to fall into one of these three buckets. And the first one is probably the most obvious one.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like, subscribe with notifications turned on, and let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. This lets YouTube know we are doing something right. Back to the show.
Which is people who've got an itch. They want to start a business, and maybe they always have, or something has happened that has meant that they either deeply want to, or they almost need to start something of their own. So they're already on that path. And we're here to provide, a kind of safe space, like a padded room in which they can bounce ideas off and end up hopefully in a good place. But there are two other boxes that, whilst I was aware of them, I hadn't really drilled down into them. And one of those I already mentioned earlier, or maybe in part one, which was the people who haven't yet done anything. So a student who's not yet even started work, or someone who's early on in their career, and they just, they've got this drive, but maybe they've not got that itch, right? They've not got that burning desire to start something, and they don't really have much to springboard off because they haven't really done that much yet in their life. But they do want to explore starting something. So, the choices might be going into a career, or, like a traditional career, or starting something, and they're not really sure. So it's a bit of an unknown. So again, can we provide an environment in which they can safely do that without jeopardizing a potential career path that might be a better fit for them? So young enterprise was a thing when I was a student, like a college, high school student. That was a thing, and we could kind of play business, but it wasn't real. We weren't selling stuff, but it wasn't a real business in a traditional sense. Here we are saying actually build a business, and don't rely on doing it one day, one evening a week outside of school. Actually, put some effort into it and be self-reliant. The third and final bucket, which probably hits hardest for me, are the mid-career or late career professionals who are looking back on their lives and saying, man, I wonder if I had a business in me. I regret not having started. But now, like my old boss that I mentioned in part one, I've got an expensive lifestyle. I've got a family to support. I've got, going back to ego, as you mentioned, Greg, right? My sense of self is tied to my job title, to the work that I do. If I were to give that up, I wouldn't be who I am. But are we able to provide them a low-risk way of dipping their toe in the water and seeing, as you mentioned, whether or not actually, holy smokes, this was always my calling and I am exceptionally good at it? So those are the three buckets. But again, right now, I don't really know of, and if anyone does know of, other ways of dipping your toe in the water in the world of entrepreneurship, do let me know, because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. But I think we provide the safest, lowest risk environment just to try things out, to have fun. And it should be fun. I know that you're big on this as well. If you're not enjoying the journey, why the heck are we doing this, right?
100%. It's got to be fun. There has to be a more immediate reward for starting a business than just, well, there isn't any. Really, you have to enjoy it, and it has to be fun. And so unless you're doing that, because it can take a while before you start seeing returns on any angle that you enter into this, either as an investor or a founder or employee, whatever. So you've got to enjoy it, 100%. I would say that that's just a good thing to a good philosophy to have in life in general, right? Whether you're going to work or whatever, just try and have fun. But especially if you're running your own business. If you're not making it fun, then chances are then your employees aren't probably finding it fun, your clients aren't finding it fun, no one's finding it fun. So it starts with you. So if you actually want to build a viable business, it's probably not a bad idea to inject a bit of joy and fun into it in the first place anyway, right? If not for your own selfish reasons, then at least for your business. So yeah, but that's really interesting as well what you mentioned about the students there too. Just to pick up on that, so the younger individuals who are kind of at that crossroads, because you mentioned how you would really be looking at individuals who are willing to take it seriously, like not just a one night a week type job, not a side hustle, basically, to use sort of Gen Z terminology. Like, but the thing is, there are loads of young entrepreneurs, not founders, right, but young entrepreneurs, I would say, that are doing just that, and they're finding these. There are some very viable micro business models that are very cash positive, and very labor whatever you call it, not so labor intensive.
Like
They can be done. Yeah, yeah, and especially seeing that in this day and age. But I mean, these are usually people that have some sort of deep understanding of a technical area or problem or solution, whatever, and they create something very small, very replicable, scalable, and they do that, and they can do that. So I mean, obviously these aren't the people that you serve, but it's just interesting you to bring that up because that is an entirely viable option for a whole generation of people now that wasn't before, or even just like I can't remember who it was I spoke to recently about this actually. Someone mentioned that their son was a content creator. And who was this? This was a guest I had recently. I can't remember if this was on air or off air, so probably good. I don't remember the name in case they told me in confidence. But their son is like a YouTuber, and they make YouTube shorts. And this kid's like 16, 17, and he's making like $1 million a month with loads of different channels, and a lot of it's automated, and it's just using, leveraging AI and different workflows and attaching all these tools together to just fully automate this process. It's a content farming type thing, and it generates a shit ton of money. It's like there are careers or money making enterprises these days that we have no idea about, and there always will be, and they're just sat there. There are some that are a little bit on the more illegal side if we start looking at crypto and all that, and blockchain, which we have to be careful of with the kids getting into. But like they're there, and that's super. I think that's cool too. We should not forget those guys. And in fact, if anything, we could probably learn a thing or two from them.
And I think what those three different buckets of people need does differ, right? Someone who's already got the itch and wants to do it may need maybe a bit of guidance, but probably a bit of community and support because it is lonely, particularly as a solo founder. Right. Maybe a younger prospective founder needs just a bit of guidance, or they need a kind of framework that they can broadly follow. Again, bearing in mind that everyone's mileage will vary, but they might need a bit more, kind of guidance as opposed to support and general encouragement. But then someone who's already got experience maybe just needs help teasing out what they could do. So they're all, whilst they're all...
And then there are those others that are just like, I'm ready, just let me go. Just give me a bit of capital, or just point me at it. I'm ready to build, I'm ready to sell. Like, just, don't worry about all of this introspective stuff. Like, I'll figure that out later. I want to go. And it's like, okay, cool. Like, I meet those people all the time too. And it's just like, wow, okay. That's the spirit. But neither one is right or wrong, right? They're just different.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point. I mean, that is not a demographic that I would look at investing in, but that's probably for selfish reasons, right? One, because I like to be involved. I'm not really like here, take my money and off you go type of person. It's just not of interest to me because I'm naturally like insatiably curious and I like to understand stuff and to get under the hood. And also that confidence, whether overconfidence or well supported, I don't know. It just scares me. I mean, that really is like throwing darts at darts at a bear or something like that, and seeing if the bear jumps and rips your head off. Probably those founders will rip your head off, and I've met plenty of them in my time as well. I'm not saying they're all inherently going to fail. Some will succeed. I just can't see a way of me, and again, going back to data points and stuff like that, me trying to predict who's going to fail or succeed if you just take a purely spray and pray approach to investing. But yeah, that's really interesting. I've not really thought of that demographic in any great detail.
Yeah. There are those. I've met them, a few times. Every now and then they're usually slightly on the younger side, maybe recent graduates or maybe just started working, come out, graduated, maybe started working at a startup for a little while, usually technical, right? Usually technical individuals. And they've just done it. They've just done it all right. They've they've learned from the online playbook of YouTube and Reddit and everything, and then work. They just know it already, and they're just like, and not in a you know in an obtuse way. They've done the work. They've done their market research. They've talked to their prospective customers. They verified their problem, their thesis. Like, they've gone out, they've built the MVP, they've tested it, they've got feedback. Like, they've just done it all, and they've just done it all themselves. They're just like, we're ready to go. Like, we've got the co-founders, we've got a pipeline. Like, we just need that initial thing, and then we're off. So we just don't need anything else. We need to deliver the product. It needs to be what people have asked for. We've got like a 10,000 people waiting list, and you're just like, okay, like, impressive, like,
I mean, they're 1,000 steps ahead of the people that we work with if they've done all that.
Yeah.
I mean, and they would be great for an early stage fund to back, for sure, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes the opportunity just isn't big enough either,
Yeah,
the maths don't work, but yeah, like, broadly speaking. But I mean, they're just it just goes to show just how, there is so much information out there. I mean, this is always the thing that I talk about as well. Is just the overwhelm of information, and how it's and we're just adding to it ourselves. We're just as guilty of it, right? In talking about the startup world and this and the other. But if you know where to focus on, and you've got a good bullshit detector, and you can just go through it at a young age, and you're hungry and you're full of energy, like, you can plow through the internet, the world, find the information you need, and just make it work. Like, it can be done. If you've got that in your head to do it, it can be done.
Well, and that's the important bit that many people miss. And fundamentally, what we are is a business launch challenge, and challenge is key because you have to take action. You could sit back and you can digest every single business book ever written, and read a million blogs and watch 1,000 hours of YouTube videos. Unless you take the very first step to actually building something and actually launching, you're never going to succeed, right? And I think that is, in this world of tons of data points and loads of noise and almost over information, and that's without even getting into whether or not the information you're being told is right for you or right for you. You've just got to get out there and do it. And if you look at, 100%. I would call like the people who are put up on pedestals, probably rightly so, as successful solo founders, bootstrappers, as in they haven't taken external capital. They have just built and launched and tried and seen what works. People like Peter Levels, who I'm sure you've heard of, they actually, like Peter Levels in particular, he's very transparent, and he has written a list of hundreds, I think, of ideas that he has tried. And the vast majority have failed, but a small percentage have done incredibly well. And he's very transparent and open about what has done well and what hasn't, and what doing well means to him. And he openly shares the numbers, so worth looking into. But that just shows how egoless you need to be, I suppose, in terms of being prepared to try and fail. I think culturally, we talked a little bit about UK versus US. I think culturally in the UK, my brother's based in the US. He's married to an American. He's got an American kid. He's got a green card, or I think he is a citizen now. And I spend a lot of time on the West Coast, seeing him and his family. So I'm not saying that is necessarily better and we in the UK are worse. I'm just comparing the two. And I think in the UK, culturally, we are more resistant to risk. We are more risk averse. And I remember reading this as a kid in the magazine. Don't ask me which magazine, but probably Maxim or something like that. And it was a quote from an entrepreneur. And he said, the difference between the UK and the US is that in the US, if you drive down the street in a chauffeur-driven limo, people will stop and clap. In the UK, they're going to pick up rocks and throw them at your limo.
Right, yeah. It's the eat the rich mentality in the UK, which, I mean, I think some of it has started to be exported over to the US and vice versa in recent years. But yeah, broadly, that's the culture, right? It's like the American dream. We don't have, what's the British dream? You know what I mean? Like, we don't have that. And it's ironic because you used it, your accelerator being called Underdog X. Like, underdog is a really important word in the UK. We love to back the underdog. but as soon as they make it, fuck you, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in the US, it's very different. It's like you can do it, and then they back you, and they back you, and they back you, and then once you're there, they keep cheering you on. They want you to continue to succeed. Um, it's interesting. There is something to that. I don't know where that comes from. World War II. I don't know. Like there's something that's kind of ingrained in our culture there a little bit, which I think is we're starting to see a bit of a sea change there a little bit, but not on the broader level. At least I think you can at least see it within the startup ecosystem. But unfortunately, not on a broader level. You won't if you go to just the random Joe blogs on the street and go, "What do you think of Elon Musk or Bill Gates?" Like they'll generally criticize them, like or Richard Branson, whoever, any entrepreneur that you can think of. But in the States, generally, you ask that question, on average, you'll probably get a lot more positive responses, provided you can remove politics from it, which right now it's not so easy. But listen, man, we've gone slightly over, and I don't want to take up any more of your time, and I need to drive back home to my regular studio where I record this podcast, and not here at Seed Legals. So yeah, but we'll definitely have to chat again because it seems like we've got plenty to talk about. This time's absolutely flown by.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. Before we wrap up, like, is there anything that you really, really wanted to say that I haven't given you the chance to say yet, or anyone you want to shout out, or anything at all? You can have the final thought, final word.
Yeah, I'll say two things. Firstly, if people want to find out more about me and what I do, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's just Mike Bank. If you want to find out more about what we do with Underdog X, it's underdogx.co, because I've not yet bought the .com. And, as a final note, thank you so much for, one, inviting me onto the podcast, but two, being so open with your thoughts and opinions, because I don't pretend to know it all, and I love meeting people like you.
None of us do.
Challenge me and make me think about things I'm not yet. I've not yet.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, likewise.
It's really powerful, and appreciate the no BS element of it as well. I love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah, none of us know enough to claim to know anything definitively, right, about anything, let alone about startups. But I'll put both of those links in the description for anyone listening or watching. You can just go in the description, find the LinkedIn profile link and your website link. Yeah, man, thank you again. I really appreciate it. Have a lovely evening because it's now getting on a bit. Great week, and if I don't speak to you before, have a wonderful festive period. I think by the time this comes out, that will have been and gone, but we're recording it ahead of time. So yeah, have a great festive period, and hopefully we'll catch up again very soon.
Same to you, my man. All right, I'll catch you soon. Ciao for now.
Cheers. Take care.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Please like and subscribe, or if you are listening via podcasting service and want to show your support, consider rating or leaving a review. It really helps. See you next week.